They thought they'd killed Stephen Hawking, then he started laughing. It was supposed to be a routine day at the University of Cambridge. A simple interview, nothing dramatic, nothing historic. Just a BBC science correspondent, Palab Ghosh, arriving with a small camera crew to speak with one of the greatest minds the world had ever known. Stephen Hawking was already a living legend by 2004. His work on black holes, time, and the universe had reshaped physics. His book had reached millions. His face, his voice, his wheelchair, instantly recognizable everywhere on Earth. But what most people didn't understand was how fragile the situation always felt around him. Stephen Hawking lived with ALS, a motor neuron disease that had slowly taken almost everything from him. He couldn't walk, he couldn't move freely, he couldn't speak without a computerized voice. Every movement, every word, every interaction depended on machines, cables, power supplies, backups, redundancies. Silence around him was never comforting, it was terrifying. That morning, Hawking was seated in his wheelchair in his Cambridge office, surrounded by papers, books, and computers. The room was cramped but familiar. This was his space, his universe, a place where he had spent decades thinking about the birth of time itself. The BBC crew began setting up their equipment. Lights, cameras, cables snaking across the floor. Everything felt normal, careful but normal. Hawking watched quietly, amused in his own way. He had seen this routine countless times before. Then a cameraman noticed a power outlet. He asked politely if he could unplug something to power his lighting. No one thought much of it. Offices have lots of plugs, computers, printers, chargers. The request seemed harmless, routine, mundane. So he reached down and pulled the plug. Instantly, a piercing alarm filled the room. Not a beep, not a warning chime. A loud, aggressive, relentless alarm. At the exact same moment, Stephen Hawking slumped forward in his wheelchair. Time stopped. Palab Ghosh felt his stomach drop through the floor. The cameraman froze in place. For a split second, no one moved, no one spoke. Every single fear they had carried into that room suddenly became real. They had unplugged the wrong thing. This wasn't a printer. This wasn't a lamp. This was Stephen Hawking. Or at least that's what they believed. The alarm screamed on. Hawking's head was tilted forward, his body motionless, his voice device silent. The room erupted into panic. People rushed toward him, someone shouted for help, someone else tried to trace the cable. The cameraman's face drained of color. The realization hit like a physical blow. They might have just disconnected life support equipment, keeping one of the greatest scientists in history alive. In that moment, it wasn't about fame or reputation or careers. It was pure, primal fear. They thought Stephen Hawking was dying in front of them. Seconds felt like minutes. Hands hovered, unsure what to touch, terrified of making things worse. The alarm continued to scream, amplifying the horror. This wasn't just a mistake. This felt like a catastrophe. And then something changed. Stephen Hawking began to shake. At first, it looked worse. Panic spiked again. Was he seizing? Was this part of it? Had they caused irreversible damage? Then they realized. He wasn't convulsing. He was laughing. As much as Stephen Hawking could laugh. His shoulders trembled, his face shifted, his eyes sparkled with unmistakable mischief. The alarm was still blaring, the room still in chaos, but Hawking was enjoying every second of it. Because the alarm wasn't coming from life support at all. It was coming from the uninterruptible power supply for his computer. The plug powered his office computer system, not his medical equipment. When it lost power, the backup battery triggered an alarm designed to warn of data loss. Loud, urgent, impossible to ignore. Hawking had never been in danger. And he knew it. He had watched the cameraman unplug the cable. He had heard the alarm. He had seen the panic spread across their faces. And instead of immediately signaling that he was fine, Stephen Hawking decided to let the moment breathe. Just a little. Long enough to scare them half to death. Long enough to turn terror into comedy. When the realization finally hit the crew, relief crashed over them like a wave. Knees weakened. Laughter broke out. Someone swore under their breath. Someone else sat down, suddenly exhausted. And Stephen Hawking. He was delighted. Those who knew him well later described his reaction as pure mirth. Dark, playful, perfectly timed. The kind of humor that only someone who had stared mortality in the face for decades could fully appreciate. To Hawking, the universe itself was absurd, time bent, space warped, black holes erased information. Why wouldn't a room full of journalists briefly think they'd unplugged his life? This moment captured something most people never fully understood about Stephen Hawking. Yes, he was a genius. Yes, he was physically fragile. But he was also mischievous. He loved jokes, especially dark ones, especially when they caught people off guard. He once said that without humor, life would be tragic. And here he was, turning one of the most terrifying moments imaginable into a punchline. The interview went on as planned. Cameras rolled, questions were asked, answers were typed out letter by painstaking letter. Hawking returned to discussing the cosmos as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But no one in that room ever forgot those few seconds. For the BBC crew, it was a reminder of how easily fear takes over when we don't understand the machines behind the miracle. For Hawking, it was just another opportunity to remind people that he was still in control, still sharp, still playful, still very much alive. That single unplugged cable became legend. A story passed quietly among journalists, a reminder told with nervous laughter. A moment that perfectly summarized Stephen Hawking's relationship with the world, fragile in body, indestructible in spirit. He spent his life exploring the biggest questions imaginable, where the universe came from, how time began, whether reality itself had limits. And yet, in a small Cambridge office, he delivered one of his most memorable lessons without saying a single word. Never underestimate the power of humor. Especially when everyone thinks the universe has just ended.